Hola, all you Suhai AP Biology students. This is Mr. McLeod again. Welcome to our next podcast on dissolved oxygen, which will serve as one of our pre-lab activities for our first lab in this class. So get your notes out, something to write with, and let's breathe deep. First, a bit of review on oxygen. I don't mean like I'm on oxygen while I'm reviewing. I'm talking about reviewing oxygen. When we talk about oxygen, we're talking about the O2 molecule, not elemental oxygen, which is just O. We call this molecule breathable oxygen. Write that down. Recall that all breathable oxygen originates through the process of photosynthesis. If you need to write the balanced equation for photosynthesis, you can see it here in this slide. Photosynthesizing organisms take in carbon dioxide and use water from the ground, then convert these substances into organic sugars we call carbohydrates. If you don't have that in your notes, this is a great time to get it in there. Do you remember what the polymer for carbohydrates is? If you said monosaccharides, simple sugars, you'd be correct. These photosynthesizing organisms give off breathable oxygen, or O2, as a byproduct of this process. And don't we love them for it? Also recall that aquatic plants and phytoplankton, which are single-cell floating plants, release oxygen into the water as a byproduct of photosynthesis. Write that down. Now, phytoplankton, like you see here, again, which are single-celled plants, are the base of the aquatic food web and provide most of the aquatic oxygen. Also get that in your notes. And in addition to photosynthesizing, submerged aquatic plants can provide shelter for young fish as well as house an abundant food supply for them. Yep, get that down. One of the benefits of the O2 or breathable oxygen molecule is that, like many other substances, it's soluble in water, which means it can dissolve in water. Now, do you remember why? Boy, I hope you do. It was a painful process of figuring out why water's a polar molecule. So you might want to review that in your mind right now. But understand that oxygen can dissolve in water. Maybe want to write that down in your notes because that's a real key property of water. Biologists classify habitats based on something called dissolved oxygen concentration, or the habitat's ability to produce oxygen. Get that in your notes. Now, there are three types of habitats we need you to get in your notes. The first is called normoxic, and you see the word normoxic right up here. So the first kind of habitat is normoxic. Now, we rate habitats based on their dissolved oxygen in an amount of milligrams per liter. Normoxic habitats have a DO, or dissolved oxygen, concentration of 2 milligrams per liter and above. Write that down. Next is hypoxic. You see the word hypoxic right here. Hypoxic habitats have a range of DO, dissolved oxygen, of 0.2 to 2 milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen. So write that down. And then a habitat is considered to be anoxic. Here's the word anoxic. if it has 0 to 0.2 milligrams per liter of dissolved oxygen. So also get that in your notes. Recall from your biology class that biological cellular respiration is the process by which organisms convert food, and in the example in this picture, it's carbohydrates, but it could be proteins or fats as well. It's the process by which it converts those organic molecules into energy and is stored as ATP. So write that down. If you look at the balanced equation for respiration that you see here in this slide, here's our balanced equation, you see that it's the exact opposite of photosynthesis. Instead of giving off oxygen like plants do in photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is given off as a byproduct in cellular respiration. That becomes important in cycling, so get that down in your notes. It also shouldn't surprise you that carbon dioxide is a soluble gas. Get that down as well. So, let's put these two processes together and make some sense out of them. There are many cycles we'll study in this class, but none may be more important than the cycle created by photosynthesis and respiration. These two processes cycle oxygen and carbon dioxide into and out of our water and atmosphere for use by both plants and animals. Write that down. The organic molecules produced by photosynthesis contribute to the structure and function of all living organisms, and their accumulation is referred to as biomass. I think we've introduced that this summer, but you can see here the term biomass, which is measured in grams per square meter per year, like you see in the slide. Grams per square meter per year, you see this. Now write that down. So biomass is measured in grams, grams per square meter per year. So oxygen is produced by photosynthesizing organisms called producers, both in the ocean and on land. And then that oxygen is consumed by all organisms in the process called cellular respiration, which produces energy stored in the ATP molecule. Write that down. That's the key cycle. So you can see here now, in respiration, carbon dioxide is produced, and remember that green plants take this carbon dioxide in photosynthesis, and then the byproduct of photosynthesis is this organic molecule. They have shown glucose here, but one of the byproducts is oxygen, or breathable oxygen, which organisms use in cellular respiration. We'll talk in great detail about both these processes, but for right now, just make sure you can see the cycling process between carbon dioxide and oxygen and explain it. Now here's a graphical illustration of the daily aquatic oxygen cycle for most bodies of water on Earth. Please get it in your notes right now. The y-axis represents the amount of dissolved oxygen, while the x-axis shows the time of day. So again, dissolved oxygen here on the y-axis, and then time of day down here on the x-axis. Now, can you make sense of this graph? If you take a look at it, does it look like it makes sense? What you need to be able to see is the relationship between the amount of light available and the amount of dissolved oxygen of it produced during that period of time. And you need to be able to give a reason why the line does what it does on the graph. By the line, we mean this curved line in the middle here. So you can see that it goes up and down during the day. So your job is to be able to explain this in case it shows up on an AP exam. Notice that the DO, dissolved oxygen, decreases during the moonshine hours, but doesn't become zero. Now remember that plants need any form of light to photosynthesize, even from moonlight. So they never really stop producing oxygen. It just decreases at night because of the reduced light level. Write that down. Of course, during the daylight hours, dissolved oxygen would increase due to the increased photosynthetic activity because of the increase in available light. So also write that down as well. Now this slide may be helpful to you in understanding dissolved oxygen levels and its relationship to the time of day. If you were given this diagram and asked to interpret it, could you? Make sure, because you could see this diagram again sometime in the near future. Now what you needed to see from the previous slide is that most plants photosynthesize during the day because of the increase in available light and perform cellular respiration at night. So remember, they're using oxygen during respiration. So oxygen builds up during the day and is used up at night during respiration, which is shown in this slide. So here's another way to look at it from a photosynthetic standpoint. So we're looking at trying to get you to have a picture of what's going on in high and low light situations. It should also be no surprise that the pH levels are affected in this cycling process. Remember from chemistry class that an increase in carbon dioxide levels in the water causes an increase in hydrogen ion concentration, therefore decreases the pH level of the water. Write that down. I would also like you to copy this chart into your notes. So pH level on the y-axis and then time of day on the x-axis. This could absolutely be a long answer question on a test. So that when carbon dioxide is being produced at night, when plants are respiring or performing cellular respiration, there's a corresponding decrease in the pH of the water, and vice versa during the day. So get that in your notes. Recall that decomposers break down dead organic matter and return the nutrients back into the soil and atmosphere. Bacteria and fungi that you see here are the best examples. Write that down. However, it takes energy for these organisms to do their jobs. Well, where does this energy come from? If you said cellular respiration, right on, baby, right on. So, decomposer organisms consume oxygen sometimes faster than plants can produce it, even during the middle of the day. Write that down. What I want you to see is that a sudden increase in organic matter, like dead leaves, can create a temporary spike in decomposition activity, especially if it's hot. Remember, heat would speed up these reactions, but write that down. If decomposition activity increases, what do you think would happen to DO, or dissolved oxygen? Right, it would decrease because the bacteria are using the oxygen for energy to do their jobs. Also get that in your notes. Here are the 5 abiotic, non-living factors that most affect the dissolved oxygen concentration. Get these in your notes, and then let's try and understand how and why each would affect dissolved oxygen levels. From a chemistry standpoint, it makes sense that the warmer the water is, the less dissolved oxygen it can hold. So get that in your notes. Also, write down this chart in your notes as well. So it's a graph now with 100% saturation level on the y-axis and temperature on the x-axis. Think about opening a can of pop after it's been sitting on the dash of your car for a couple hours in the summer. When you open it up, it can be a mess because the oxygen has left the solution. It wants to be released back into the atmosphere because of the heat. Write that down. Now let's correlate it to this graph. Notice the shape of the line in this graph. It shows that as the temperature increases up across the y-axis, the dissolved oxygen level decreases. That's an inverse relationship. Yep, write that down. This slide shows this process. When the water increases in temperature, the oxygen diffuses out of it into the atmosphere, therefore creating a situation where it can hold more than it normally would. We call that supersaturation. Get that in your notes. I think this slide kind of speaks for itself. When the wind blows, it stirs up now atmospheric oxygen and allows more of it to be dissolved in the water. So get that down in your notes. So wind stirs in atmospheric oxygen into the water. Again, I also believe this speaks for itself, so let's get it in your notes as well. Almost the same as wind, current velocity now mixes up the water and allows more oxygen to be mixed into that water. So the faster the water flows, the more oxygen's mixed into the water. Get that relationship down in your notes as well. Now in this slide, we see the effect of water clarity on dissolved oxygen. What we mean is the muddier the water is, the less light that reaches the plants. Makes sense that if there's less light, there'd be less photosynthesis. Less photosynthesis, less dissolved oxygen. Write that down. Again, you should also see that the opposite is true. Clear water allows sunlight to reach the plants. Plants photosynthesize at a higher rate and more dissolved oxygen in the water. And finally, cloud cover also reduces the amount of sunlight that reaches the plants, same as muddy water would. This reduces photosynthetic levels and in turn reduces oxygen levels in the water as well. So get that down in your notes. Okay, that's it for our introduction to dissolved oxygen. Go ahead and submit your notes to Moodle. Go grab that study guide in Moodle and then answer the questions. Cheers!